وإذا مدحك الناس فامنعهم، وإذا ذهبت إلى بيتك قل لها أنت وأنت وأنت وأنت. قد كان بعض الصحابة يلوم نفسه لوما شديدا، حتى قال عمر الفاروق رضي الله عنه كما ذكر ذلك المفسرون عند قوله تعالى في سورة الحشر: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد. ما هو الغد؟ الحشر، لأن الآية في سورة الحشر. قال حاسبوا أنفسكم قبل أن تحاسبوا وزنوا أعمالكم قبل أن توزن لكم.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. This noble sheikh has reminded us something really pleasant, I'd argue, even though it's not easy for everyone to do. And he just said the quiet part out loud that so many of us need to be reminded of, which is that when people praise us, we should prevent them and stop them. And that we should remind ourselves essentially of our shortcomings. And we should look forward to, we should think about what we've sent forth for Judgment Day. Look at our shortcomings, see our actions, measure ourselves, weigh what we've done. Because when you're praised, now everyone needs a boost, a pep talk, a motivational speech, lecture, session, counseling session, because sometimes you run out of gas. You need some cheerleaders in your corner sometimes to keep going against society's chaos. And some people are facing tough battles, and a compliment can go a long ways. But I think a lot about when I hear something like this of people like Joel Osteen, and he's got this mega church, he's always smiling, and then it took him a while to open up his mega church towards the hurricane victims, I believe it was. And you see how they really drink up the limelight. And I've caught myself in the past having to be very cautious of just how you take compliments, because if you think that you're some type of special person, you start to treat others differently. You get a sort of guru complex where you're just treating everyone like a fan. And I think the main character syndrome, main character energy that's being taught to women really hides their capacity to look at how imperfect they actually are. One could argue that the main character energy would mean that you're still having introspective moments, but that you don't necessarily live for others, but you live for yourself. But as a believer, we exist to worship Allah, and life isn't just about the here and now. You must prepare for the real life, which is the hereafter, and we are but wayfarers here, strangers in this realm, and we must not get lost in the sauce and too attached to the dunya, because Allah will extract us and collect us home whenever He wills, and tomorrow is not guaranteed for everyone. So there's that. Now, think about how Trump requires a lot of sycophants around him. If you look at his 10-year span, right, journey, pretty much almost, of politics, you'll see that he requires unwavering loyalty, and how he goes after people who even slight him even a little bit. But then you look at how politics is a dirty game of betrayal. And I think about the moment where Tim Pool went and gave questions at the White House and how he was like very complimentary to Trump. And it just came off as brown nosing, what we call as brown nosing. And I think all of us have probably had a coworker who was a brown noser, and you can just feel the fakeness. It's gross. There's a difference between giving genuine compliments and where it's performative, manipulative, tactical, strategical. And if one isn't careful, they can be honeypotted by the most conniving individuals. And if you are someone who does what this sheikh says, and you're fearful of Allah, and you don't get this sort of God complex, shall we say, main character syndrome, by consistently reminding yourself of how pathetic you really are, not to where you have self-hatred, but there can be healthy forms of self-deprecation where you can laugh at yourself and not take yourself too seriously, but you also have the balance of not taking everything in life as a joke. It's necessary now, especially in the age of influencers. I recall there was 2 examples. A woman went to eat at a restaurant, an Asian restaurant. She wanted a discount, or I think it was like a free meal. He said, you don't even, like the head chef's the owner, he said, you don't even have enough followers for us to give you that. She outed him. The place got boycotted, went out of business. But then there's been other influencers who, they weaponize their influence and they go to places and they say like, oh, I'm featuring you on my channel. It's basically free publicity, so I should get a free meal. And as a business transaction, you're like, okay. But also, that person is using their sort of bloated ego, self-importance, pompous nature to get free things. And they're being cheap, even though they have usually the means to pay the proper price and not demand stuff for free. So, celebrity worship is really common in America, and I think it's almost a form of control. The masses strive to be famous for arbitrary things rather than intelligent or known for their piety, known for their charity, known for their, environmentalism. People rather be known, at least in America, for things that are not important, not life-changing. And you see this a lot in the right-wing sphere because everyone wants to stay popular. They go to those Turning Point USA events. They want to be featured on Glenn Beck. Or they want to make the Daily Wire routines. They want to be certified and approved and sort of let into the gatekeeper stardom. And then there's edgelords who want to be popular for always pushing the boundaries. They want to be awe-inspiring, but for the very different reasons. And so, when it comes to knowledge, we have to be very cautious. Whatever field we are good in, any field we want to excel in, we have to remind ourselves that if we make it, we have to be cautious of having an inflated ego because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could humble us. If you think about the Fast and Furious main character guy, the white guy, Justin Walker, I don't remember his name. But the Fast and Furious movies were really popular at one time. He got notoriety, and the youth started racing their cars, and it started causing a lot of car crashes and dangers. I remember my friends, we would actually do that. You pull up to the stoplight, you rev your car, and then that person knew you wanted to speed down the Broadway, and it was reckless, super dangerous. Then that actor, he died in a car crash himself. It was like a sort of cosmic irony. And he got notoriety for encouraging this sort of dangerous driving, and he died by it. The actions he put forth into the world was encouraging speeding, and it took his life. Another thing, I've noticed this, okay, with like Alex Jones. Alex Jones, he became super popular. He would do these WWE, WWF style characters for his older radio shows, and it made him entertaining. And then he'd get these leaks and tips from viewers, and the audience started to sort of puppet him to become more and more conspiratorial, and then he got himself into trouble with Sandy Hook. And that has really dug into his life and come back and bit him. There are people who are ruled by their chat. They want the chat to love them, to praise them. It's like, think of all the chats, if it was to manifest in front of you as like this tornado, this sort of spiraling energy right in front of you, and it's like an entity. All that consciousness rolled up into this ephemeral thing, and it becomes a sort of companion. People's chats become a companion to their consciousness, and then they get the boost from the chat. And when the chat goes south, they're like, ban, block. I understand banning 1 or 2 trolls, but because, I mean, there's some people who it's like, they're always just looking for a way to get under your skin, and they're not adding anything productive. They're not sincere in their criticism, so what use are they? But there's this people who, they want to serve the chat. So they want the chat to be filled with yes men. And it's like an echo chamber, where now this grouping mass of consciousness, digital expression of consciousness, is now guiding you. It's a crutch for you. The chat becomes a sort of crutch mentally for you. It's always feeding you compliments, and then you become a maniac. You become so addicted to that, you can't stop going live. I think a lot of streamers fall into that. We're isolated, displaced, digitized, and then our social dependency is in another digital realm. And it's different based on each app. Some it's kick.com, others it's Twitch, Instagram, YouTube, you name it. And the chat is like a floating... You think about it, you have your selfie stick, you got your phone, you're traveling, and your chat is there with you, and then they turn to the chat, they read it, they want the chat to like conform and confirm everything good about them, to the point where you will see influencers scan the chat, they're ignoring all the compliments, and then boom, there's a negative one. And they're like, okay, this person must be removed, even if it's a slight pushback, because I need this chat to constantly feed me compliments. So think about what this sheikh said when he said that when people praise you, prevent and stop them. When have you seen an influencer tell their chat, stop complimenting me? Something to think about. Now, there's nothing wrong, I'd argue, with, to a certain degree, someone telling you, hey, you really helped me. Say, okay, good. But also remember that there's somebody who you've probably harmed or blackpilled, or made them feel more depressed after. Not saying that your job is to be an emotional tampon for everyone. You're not everyone's therapist, and sometimes it's healthy to have your bubble popped and you kind of float down to reality, there's a benefit in being in the realm of cynicism sometimes, because you kind of get a reality check. But it depends on where you linger, what kind of dosage you're getting from your content creators that you follow, and your relationship with them. How someone takes criticism, how someone gives criticism is also really important. But imagine a maniacal type of doctor who they're always being told by the nurses, and maybe the higher ups how great they are, but then a peon pleb comes and says like, hey, I think you really messed up on this part, and then that doctor just lashes out at them. How dare you? Do you know who I am? I remember there was this hilarious video of two British guys. One's in the car. They're having an argument. And one says, do you know who I am? And he goes, do I care? And that has stuck with me for years now. It's the perfect reply when someone tries to flex on you by saying like, do you know who I am? It's like, do I care? But I get at the same time, there are some people who you gotta be cautious because you don't know who they are. And then on another level, one could be dealing with a camouflaged individual where, think of like in Beauty and the Beast, the vintage one. An old lady comes to the door of the prince. She's ugly. She asks for shelter. The prince says no because she's ugly and old, slams the door. Suddenly she blooms and transforms into a beautiful witch who casts a spell on him because of his cruelty and his lack of mercy, because he thinks he's so high and mighty. She takes him off his high horse and transfigures him into an ugly beast. And then he has to get someone to fall in love with him in his ugly state. And, she took away his beauty and made him have to only get someone to fall in love with him based off his personality, not his looks, which is very difficult. So on a very folktale level, you have to be careful with who you treat, because you never know who you're dealing with. You recall the hadith where the angel Jibril came and asked questions to the companions, wasn't it? And then the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, do you know who that was? That was Jibril. It was like, yes, the angel Jibril asked questions about Islam to kind of test them. So an angel was transformed to look like a human. So I don't know if you're allowed to say that you could be encountering an angel disguised as a human. But you just think about how don't treat people bad just because they're lowly. And don't flatter just because they appear to have status. Also think about how, I recall on HBO's John Adams, they showed how John Adams had to do this performative walk in order to become in the presence of King George III. And there are some cases of that, if you look through the history books, where you do have to act super special around the king, to the point where it's just performative pageantry, and it's ostentatious, and it's weird. But that a human being would require that you act like that, it's very Pharaoh-esque. Pharaoh thought himself a god. He thought himself so important, so utterly powerful. He had those sort of magicians at his side. His little hall of smoke and mirrors. But he was humbled by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Aaron and Moses going there, Harun and Musa, going there and not looking all fancy in tuxedos and like decked out in gold. They just look in the humble clothes. The Egyptian court was looking at them like, who the heck are these guys? And they're like judging them, most assuredly. So Pharaoh had this sort of low view of them, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had a high view of them. So much so, Musa was chosen to be a prophet, and he was saved in so many ways. So just as Pharaoh liked to be complimented, just as kings and queens like to be complimented, just as egomaniac bosses like to be complimented, celebrities adore to be worshipped, literally worshipped. Think about the costumes they wear. Madonna in her, occultic getup, Beyonce. It's bizarre. And it's this lavish ceremony of this harvesting of energy where it's the ultimate fulfillment of attention transaction, which is addictive. Women do love attention, which is why they fear having to cover up their hair, wear niqab, not wear makeup, women will dream about being photographed naked, whereas, with men, that's not necessarily a value. Although, one could argue men's bodybuilding is a form of self-worship. Others could argue it's just giving testimony to help. Being appreciative of the ability that your body functions, and it increases your chances of finding an attractive mate. Because letting your body get fat is like worshiping gluttony. And you have not held your body's rights up high enough. Point is, if we as Muslims remind ourselves of our shortcomings, not to the point where we have pernicious and malicious self-hatred, but where we can sit back and say, okay, oh, thank you, but, you having a graceful way of accepting a compliment, because it is kind of off-putting when you give someone a compliment and they, turn it down to where you feel like, oh, jeez, come on, man, I was just trying to give you a compliment. Ugh. But there's a point where you can go home and sort of, like he said, remind yourself, instead of putting that person down, shutting them down harshly, you can do it in a way that they don't become offended, but to where you are reminded of, hey, watch out for flattery. Because if you think about an evil villain, they can totally be like, you're so special. There's no one like you. Yes, you're so smart. If you look up, they were saying that ChatGPT was creating psychosis in people, and that it would solidify some people's delusional thought patterns. And when Elon and these other AI weirdos are programming AI to have a sort of romantic language code, people will start to cling to that. And nobody wants the AI to hold them accountable. They want to be told everything that their heart desires. And when you think about how they put AI to have a lady's voice, an attractive voice, you're like, whoa. I recall a news story where a guy, his chat app reset, so the memory was lost, and he cried, and he felt like his female assistant died. He was married, he had a 2-year-old child, and he broke down mentally because his female AI assistant rebooted and had to start all over again. Because I think you have a certain threshold of questions you can ask or something, or there's a certain threshold that can be met. And I thought to myself, that poor wife, her husband has fallen in love and is crying over a chatbot. Then you think about mothers who their sons deleted themselves because the chatbot told them to, and solidified their delusional thinking. The chatbot is getting you to have just too much of an echo chamber, a false reality. So there's a great benefit in us to consistently check our ego and realize we are not that important. There was a lot of idolatry when Charlie Kirk died. When you really examine it, people placed him in images of had Jesus, MLK, JFK, and this lineup, and you're like, why would you even put Jesus next to those people? What the hell is wrong with you? And to put Kirk next to Jesus, it's like a form of idolatry. I even saw one of the... if you go through my Charlie Kirk saga, I showed that there was a guy, I think he worked for Turning Point USA. He called Charlie Kirk a prophet. That he was sent as a prophet. So just milking it, trying to do an audience capture of the followers who are looking, where should we go now? It's sick. And then you see how his wife did that sort of WWE, WWF memorial, which was a political rally, and then she's propped up, and there's a lot of like, oh, she's a widow, you can't criticize her even though she's a CEO. There's a lot of worship going on, a lot of idolatry. It's strange. We live in really weird times, and people do that with Trump as well. He has a strong cult of personality where they'll say God chose Trump to lead America. And it's very strange. Very strange. So, Trump is like a good example of someone who can't take public criticism, public rebelliousness or anything like that. But you want to have an A-team, but there's a point where if no one can do any pushback, there's going to be some issues. So, remind yourself of what this Sheikh was talking about. And remind yourself that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can humble us at any time. I remember Lauren Chen, she was mocking this girl from Somalia. She just got her hair done. Unfortunately, she has a large forehead. I have a giant forehead. But she had a larger forehead than me, which is quite impressive since mine is so large. And they said if I drew her in the UK, I'd be arrested for a hate crime. And I thought to myself, isn't that funny? Lauren Chen has been given temporary beauty. She got fat after she had kids and then lost the weight. Because by Asian standards, you need to be so thin that you have that little pool on your shoulder where you could put a goldfish. I mean, Asian women are encouraged to be very slim. Americans are obese considering what Asian standards used to be for Chinese and Japanese women. And she's part Canadian, part Chinese, I believe. By Asian standards, she's fat. By Western standards, she's mid. But her ego of like, I'm so hot, I'm so attractive, I'm gonna make fun of this Somali girl for her forehead, which she didn't choose. It was disgusting. Because you're like, okay, like when someone is attacking Pearl Davis, that makes sense. In terms of, because Pearl judges women constantly. And then people point out, well, you are very hard on the eyes, so you should humble yourself. Not saying that pretty women should attack the uglies, but that if you are grotesque yourself, you should take a seat. Because there's points of looking at objective beauty and saying, you could do better here, you could do better there. A plastic surgeon, a professional trainer, they're looking at you trying to see how they can enhance your beauty maxing, looks maxing. But then there's the point of where a woman thinks she's the belle of the ball and she's just dunking on the uglies. And that's when she becomes more spiritually disturbed inside. Because she was granted beauty, temporary beauty, because we're all going to get old and ugly. And we should age with grace and let go and let other people enjoy their beauty and we can retire into our granny phase. But her simp worship, the simps telling her how beautiful she is, how wonderful she is, has made her have the audacity to go around dunking on women who are less than attractive. And so we have to be mindful of that. It would be amazing for, like, if another woman says you're beautiful and you say, yeah, but I have this that I don't like about myself. Like, remind yourself of your own imperfections, both spiritually, physically, just, there's all kinds of imperfections, but remind yourself. So if you look at what this sheikh said, no matter where the compliment comes from, you have to check yourself before you wreck yourself. By doing so, and having this sort of rugged analysis, you can prevent quite a lot coming to you. That doesn't mean you don't take care of yourself. That doesn't mean that you don't try to do your best. Or that you can't, speak honestly about certain things. But it just means that you don't think you're perfect. And people can strive for perfection. There could be something noble about the pursuit of virtue, rugged, self-empowerment in terms of constantly trying to succeed and do more and more and more and meet your goals. But you don't want to become someone who is dependent upon what others think and say, and you live and die by it. I hope that makes sense. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, and join the blog.